Well, how many of you love to be out helping in the garden? Right, there are some adults, yeah, okay. Right, not all of you. Do any of you particularly like at this time of year raking up big piles of leaves? Right. Do any of you like when somebody's raked up a big pile of leaves, running through it and kicking them everywhere? I thought there might be more response for that bit. We have a number of trees in our garden, and you can go out and rake them up, and then 5 minutes later, the place is full of leaves again. But when you have trees that do that, why are they getting rid of the leaves? And I think partly they make food for the leaves when it's sunny. So the sun gives them energy to help the leaves to grow. And if there's fruit trees, fruit to grow, we get really good fruit. This year we had some really big figs in our garden. And we had, I mean, so many apples. I was giving away bucket loads of them. I don't know, was it because it was a really good summer? I wasn't here. I missed the summer here. But I don't know, was it because there was loads of heat and the fruit was really good this year? And if it's a deciduous tree, the frost gets them. And the wind gets them. So when they get cold and you see them starting to turn and to change colour, it's lovely to look at. But you know that within a very short time, you're going to be out with a rake because they're going to be everywhere. Loads of leaves are damaged as well by insects that eat them. And they lay their eggs, and the wee larvae or the beetles or whatever it is, the insects grow and they eat the leaves. So the leaf in a tree by the autumn has become a bit redundant. It's a bit of a liability because it's taking energy that the tree wants to keep to itself so it's ready to grow come the spring. And so the tree protects itself and it just casts off the leaves, gets rid of them, says, don't need you, there you go, off you go. Now, you may be sitting there thinking to yourself, what on earth is he gibbering on about now? Why are we doing leaves? Soldiers, sailors, airmen don't know when they will be called on to fight. They wait for orders, but they don't know what's going to happen to them once the battle starts. Jesus knew what was going to happen to him. He had told his disciples for ages that he was going to Jerusalem and he was going to be killed. He knew what was coming. They didn't get it. They didn't really understand, even although he told them. Sometimes we're a bit like that, aren't we? People tell us things and we go, oh yes, but actually you're shaking your head thinking, I have no idea what you're talking about. I see it here every Sunday. So he told his disciples that they needed, and they used this word, remain. To remain in him, they had to stay with him. They had to think about what he had taught them, and they had to try and remember it, and they had to try and do it. So that's what it means to remain with him and to be true to him. And very quickly they forgot. So at that time when he needed them most, they ran away. The point about it is, Jesus called himself the vine or the tree, but he says, I'll never throw away my branches or my leaves. I'll always keep them and keep them healthy and keep them safe. But sometimes, as his friends did when he was alive, sometimes the leaves say to him, I'm off. I've had enough of this. And they leave him. According to Jesus in the reading that we had today, the real thing that we need to remember about being with him is that it's about love. He says, I have loved you even as the Father has loved me, so remain in my love. When you obey my commands, you do remain in my love, just as I obey my Father's commands and remain in his love. I've told you this. He actually told them why he was telling them. That's pretty good. I've told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. So what he's saying is the love that he has, that Jesus has for us, is the same love that God has within himself. That's amazing, because God's really got quite a lot of love. And what he says is, you can have that, you can share that, you can be part of that. I think that's fantastic. And we see it, he says, in two ways. First of all, people who stay or remain, as he uses that word, in Jesus, people who love Jesus, are filled with joy. Aye. See, sometimes on a Sunday, you would wonder. Filled with joy. People who love God are supposed to be people who are really full of life and passion and enthusiasm. They're excited about just being a child of God. It's a great thing to know God and to know that you're loved by God. Even when things get hard and difficult, because things always in life get hard. Every one of us goes through times that we really struggle. And even at those points, Jesus says, if you trust me, if you love me, if you stay with me, I'll give you joy because I love you. And the other thing that we should have is we see that in obedience. That's another word that we don't like very much. How many of you just love it when an adult says to you, go and tidy your room? I thought that. Nobody, not even an adult likes that. I have how old is he? 22. I have a 22-year-old son. And his room is so bad that you can't actually open the door. Right? The stench that comes from his room when you open. And I keep saying to him, will you do something about this mogar? That's a good old word, a mogar. Right? It's filthy and disgusting and smelly. And that's just him. Will you do something about this mess? And he says yes. But he's never once done it. We don't like obeying somebody else's commands. It's easy to say that we love God, but we need to show that we love God. Partly through the joy that we find in being with God's people and loving God's people, but also in just doing what he's told us to do, to love our neighbor as ourselves. And to love him more than anybody else. So, a wee bit more about fallen leaves. Today, across the country and in other places around the world, we are paying tribute to those men and women, and sometimes boys and girls, who gave their lives for this country. I heard during the week that in the hours before the armistice was signed, the armistice was on the 11th of the 11th at 11, which is why we had the silence this morning at 11, just to remember that. And they knew it was to be signed. But even though they knew it was to be signed and they knew there was going to be peace, do you know what they did? They kept fighting. 2,700 people on both sides were killed in the hours leading up to peace. For what? And ever since, men and women and boys and girls have been killed, and very often, those of us who are here would say, and for what? For love of country? Yeah. For honor? Yes. Because it's your job? Yes. For your friends and your family? Yes. For all sorts of reasons. They, like fallen leaves, might be considered to have been discarded by their nation. But when we come each year to remember, we realize they're not thrown away and their lives are not wasted. They laid down their lives for their friends. And Jesus says there's no greater love that people can have than that. So today we honor their memory. We recall their sacrifice. We thank God for the deliverance that we have. This country is what it is because over the years people have gone to war to fight for it. We are able to come and to gather like this because people have stood up to be counted. A soldier goes to war in quest sometimes of adventure or out of high principles and ideals, but at the end of the day, when he's facing death, it's those people around him, the people who support him, that are important. It's his mates, the friend that sticks by you regardless. He would do anything for them. They would do anything for her. They're a team. But we also remember today those who came back from war with physical or mental injuries. People who suffered loss in their families, who struggle with the aftermath of injury and recovery. All of them also can feel like they've been cast off. They feel abandoned. I said that Jesus called himself the vine or the tree, but he is not just that. He was also the first leaf, to continue that analogy. He was a leaf that fell willingly. When he speaks of the love that lays down its life, he's speaking of something that he knew, that he understood, that he did. He's not saying you should do that, and it's something he's never done himself. Romans chapter 5 and verse 10. I think these are amazing words. I mean that while we were God's enemies, he made friends with us through his Son's death. What better friend could you have than God? He saw the world and he wept. His heart was broken. But he didn't just say, oh, too bad. He took action. He came and he lived and he died. He left the comfort and the glory of heaven to come into this world. We remember that in a few weeks. I forgot to get the number of days and hours till Christmas. I know you like that kind of information. It's not long. But we remember then Emmanuel, God with us. He came and he lived and he died. He understands what it is to be human. He understands what it is to suffer because he's been there and he's been through it. He understands what it is to bear the taunts and the rejection of men and women. Men and women who for Jesus questioned his motives and challenged his authority. Why did he come? Because his heart had broken. He came to open up the only way by which people can get a life that's restored to God. And so today, and as I said, up and down this country, there's a challenge being issued. Considering the challenge of the Lord's words and his actions, have you taken a long, hard look at what he did on the cross, in suffering and dying and rising again to rescue you and me from a fate worse than death? Have you ever knelt before his cross and cried out, Lord, when I think about your love for me and the punishment that you took for me, I want to take you as my Savior and Lord. I want you to be in my heart, to cleanse me and save me and make me new, and to keep me for all eternity. The Bible says that if you haven't done that, then you should today, because this is the only day that you can be sure of. And then, I couldn't find another bit of leaf, and obviously they couldn't either when they were writing this, so they've come up with a leaf out of his book. Because that's what Jesus said that we were to do. We were to take a leaf out of his book. He said, in the readings, he says that we are to follow the example that he set. We are supposed to mirror the love that he had for people. And I know sometimes there are folk that I just don't like. You know the folk that annoy you? The ones that just, it doesn't matter what they do or what they say, they just really irritate you. Have you got a brother or sister? No, sorry. But there are people like that. There are people that we just don't get on with. We just don't take to, that we just find really difficult. And one example of being a Christian is to love that person, even if we don't like them. And sometimes we also are called to give up our own hopes, our own ambitions, all those things that we hold dear, and to say, actually, I'm going to put God first. To give up, in that sense, our own lives. So it's not only those who have served in war, but each of us are called every day to follow the example of Jesus. But if we're honest, we know that's really hard. We know it's really hard. I can't do it on my own. In fact, I'm pretty hopeless at it. So how do we do it? How do we measure up to that calling to love people that we don't even like and to be the example that Jesus calls us to be? Well, he said he would help us to do it. He said, if you remain in me, that means if you read the Bible, if you pray, if you spend time with God, he'll give us what we need in order to live the kind of life he's called us to live. So we should do those things and remain in him. When the angels came, if you go to Moncton Primary, you'll find out very shortly. And you should remember this because I'm going to ask a question. When the angels came, they brought good news. It was good news. And it was that Jesus had been born and he was going to save the world. The gospel, the good news, is the very power of God. He doesn't tell us to go and do things that he's not done himself. And he doesn't say, you're on your own. He says, I'm asking you to do this and I'm coming with you. So come on, let's go. And it might be hard to give up whatever we've been asked to give up or to do whatever we've been asked to do, but he says, I'll be with you. Come on, let's go. Some in time have been called on to die for their friends. The rest of us are called to live for ours. It's still a commitment. There's still a cost. But through it all, Jesus says, I will be with you. So, we've all been called to love and to serve, and if need be, to lay down physically or spiritually our own lives. May God help us to serve wholeheartedly and unreservedly, and to know the dignity and honor of true service. A fallen leaf dies. It breaks down eventually and disappears. But Jesus says those who trust him, who remain in him, will never die. There is hope for today, and there is hope for tomorrow in Jesus. He gave his life so that we could live. Amen.